Before writing a single line of application code, we need a consistent, reproducible environment. We use NVM to manage node versions, Vita to scaffold a fast React TypeScript project, and ESLint plus Prettier to enforce code quality from day one. Environment variables are stored in a .env file and prefixed with Vita _ so Vita exposes them safely to the client bundle. Build tools sit between your source code and the browser, handling all the heavy lifting that makes modern development workflows possible. They let you write clean, modular code using the latest language features while ensuring the output runs efficiently across all environments. Choosing the right build tool early shapes your project's performance, developer experience, and scalability. Version control is the foundation of every professional front-end project. Here we initialize Git locally, commit our starting files, and push everything up to a remote repository on GitHub so our work is backed up and ready for collaboration from day one. Instead of wrapping everything in generic div tags, Semantic HTML uses purpose-built elements like header, main, article, aside, and footer. These tags communicate meaning to browsers, search engines, and screen readers, making your page more accessible and SEO-friendly. Notice how the structure itself tells a story about what each section of content actually represents. Accessibility is not an afterthought, it's a core quality standard that ensures your app works for every user, regardless of ability. By combining semantic markup, sufficient color contrast, and thorough keyboard and screen reader testing, you create experiences that are inclusive by design. Building these habits early in your project saves costly retrofitting and makes your front end genuinely production ready. Form validation is the gatekeeper between user input and your application logic. Here we track field values in state, run a validate function on submit that returns an errors object, and only proceed when that object is empty. Displaying errors inline next to each field gives users immediate, contextual feedback without a page reload. Flexbox is your go-to for aligning items along a single axis, perfect for NAV bars, button groups, and centering content. Grid shines when you need full two-dimensional control over rows and columns simultaneously, like building a full-page layout. Use them together, Grid for the macro layout, Flexbox for the components inside it. CSS custom properties let you define design tokens once in root and reference them everywhere with var. By redefining those same variable names under a data theme attribute, you can swap an entire color scheme with a single set attribute call, no class juggling, no duplicate rules. This pattern scales beautifully into full design systems with tokens for color, spacing, typography, and more. Responsive design ensures your application looks great and functions correctly regardless of the device your user is on. By combining media queries, fluid grids, and a mobile-first mindset, you build layouts that scale gracefully from a 320px phone screen all the way up to a wide desktop monitor. DOM manipulation lets you read and change any element on the page directly from JavaScript. Here we select an existing heading, update its text and style, then dynamically create a button and attach it to the document. Finally, an event listener makes the page respond to user interaction. This is the core loop of interactive front-end development. Event handling is how your UI reacts to user actions like clicks, key presses, and form submissions. We attach listeners with add event listener, use the event object to access details like the target element, and call prevent default to override default browser behavior. Always remove listeners you no longer need to avoid memory leaks. The Fetch API is the modern replacement for XML HTTP request, giving us a promise-based way to make HTTP requests directly in the browser. You can chain, then, calls to handle the response and pass JSON, or use async, a wait for code that reads more like synchronous logic. Always check response, OK before parsing, since Fetch only rejects on network failures, not on 4xx or 5xx status codes. Component architecture is the blueprint that determines how maintainable and scalable your front-end will be as it grows. By thinking in layers, from tiny atomic pieces up to full-page layouts, you create a system where each piece is easy to test, reuse, and reason about. Getting this structure right early saves enormous refactoring effort later in the project. State management is the backbone of any dynamic front-end application. It determines how data flows through your components and when the UI re-renders. As your app grows, keeping state organized and predictable becomes critical to avoiding bugs and prop drilling nightmares. Understanding when to use local state versus a global store will make your architecture cleaner and your team's life much easier. React Router lets you map URL paths to specific components without ever reloading the page. The routes component evaluates each route in order and renders the first match, while the wildcard path catches any URL that doesn't match, giving you a built-in 404 handler. Dynamic segments like id are extracted with the use params hook, making it easy to build data-driven pages driven entirely by the URL. Unit testing is the practice of writing small, focused tests that verify individual pieces of your code work correctly in isolation. By running these tests automatically on every change, you catch bugs before they reach production and build confidence to refactor freely. Starting with simple pure functions and utility helpers is the easiest way to build a healthy testing habit. Performance optimization is about removing friction between the user and your content. Faster load times directly improve engagement, conversion, and SEO rankings. By combining asset compression, lazy loading, and smart caching strategies, you can dramatically reduce both bundle size and network overhead. Make performance a habit, not an afterthought, by integrating Lighthouse audits into your C pipeline from day one. Deploying a front-end application is the final step that puts your work in front of real users, and modern platforms make it remarkably straightforward. By connecting your repository to a service like Vercel or Netlify, you get automatic deployments, HTTPS, and a global CDN with almost no manual configuration. Always verify your production build succeeds locally first, and make sure sensitive credentials live in environment variables rather than committed code. A closure is formed when an inner function retains access to variables from its outer function's scope, even after that outer function has finished executing. This lets us create private state and factory functions. The counter example shows count persisting across calls without being exposed globally. Closures are foundational to patterns you'll see everywhere in front-end code, from event handlers to React hooks. Promises solve callback hell by letting you chain asynchronous operations in a flat, readable sequence. Async, await, goes one step further, making async code look and behave like synchronous code while still being non-blocking. When tasks are independent of each other, reach for promise.all to run them in parallel and cut your total wait time. Design patterns give you a shared vocabulary and battle-tested strategies so you're not reinventing the wheel on every project. In JavaScript, patterns like the module pattern for encapsulation or the observer pattern for event-driven communication show up constantly in frameworks like React and Vue. Learning these patterns helps you write code that's easier to read, extend, and debug as your front-end projects grow. Even though JavaScript handles memory automatically, poorly written front-end code can still leak memory, slowing down or crashing the browser over time. Understanding how the garbage collector works and where references linger lets you write components that clean up after themselves. Tools like Chrome's memory panel make it practical to catch and fix leaks before they ship to production. CSS gives us two main tools for motion. Transitions handle smooth changes between two states triggered by events like hover or focus, while keyframe animations let you define a full sequence of steps that can loop or run automatically. The key properties to master are transition shorthand for quick effects, and the keyframes rule paired with the animation property for complex choreography. Timing functions like ease, linear, and cubic bezier control the feel of movement, turning flat interfaces into responsive, polished experiences. BEM stands for block, element, and modifier, a naming convention that makes your CSS predictable and easy to maintain at scale. A block is a self-contained component like a card, an element is a child piece of that block written with double underscores, and a modifier describes a variant or state using double hyphens. This flat, explicit naming eliminates specificity wars and makes it immediately clear where every style belongs. CSS-in-JS libraries like styled components let you write actual CSS scope directly to a component, with full access to props for dynamic styling. Here we create a button with a primary variant driven by a prop, then extend it into a large button, no class name collisions, no separate style sheet. This pattern keeps styles co-located with the component logic, making your codebase easier to maintain and refactor. Micro-Frontend Architecture extends microservices thinking to the UI layer, letting teams build and ship their slices of the product autonomously. The biggest win is organizational. Smaller, focused codebases reduce merge conflicts and enable independent release cycles. The trade-off is added complexity around runtime integration, shared state, and keeping the user experience feeling cohesive. Server-side rendering shifts the work of building your page's HTML from the user's browser to the server, so the first thing a visitor receives is a complete, readable document. This leads to faster perceived load times, better core web vitals scores, and content that search engines can reliably crawl and index. Modern meta frameworks like Next.js make adopting SSR straightforward, letting you choose rendering strategies on a per-page basis. Apollo Client is the most popular way to connect a React front-end to a GraphQL API. You initialize a client with your API endpoint, wrap your app in Apollo Provider, then use the use query hook to fetch type data declaratively inside any component. Notice how GraphQL lets you request exactly the fields you need. No overfetching, no underfetching. Web workers let you run expensive JavaScript on a background thread so the main thread, and your UI, stays responsive. You communicate between threads using post message and on message, passing serialized data back and forth. This pattern is essential for tasks like image processing, large data crunching, or any loop that would otherwise freeze the browser. Front-end security is not just a back-end concern. Attackers frequently target the browser itself through injection attacks, stolen credentials, and malicious third-party code. Understanding threats like XSS and CSRF helps you design components and data flows that never blindly trust user input or external content. Pairing these practices with a strong content security policy and disciplined dependency management dramatically shrinks your application's attack surface. Content security policy is one of the most powerful tools a front-end developer has to defend against cross-site scripting attacks. By declaring exactly which origins are allowed to serve each type of resource, you take away the attacker's ability to execute injected scripts. Start in report-only mode to catch violations without breaking your app. Then gradually tighten the policy until you can enforce it confidently in production. Authentication and authorization are two distinct concepts that work together to secure your application. Authentication answers, "Who are you?" using mechanisms like JWTs or OAuth, while authorization answers, "What can you do?" by gating routes and features based on roles or permissions. As a front-end developer, your job is to reflect auth state clearly in the UI, but remember that real security enforcement must always happen on the server.